you, Leah, for that beautiful introduction. It's all good with the last name. It takes years. And it is such a blessing to be here in this beloved spiritual community of Centers of Spiritual Living Boulder Valley, and with all these beloved guests who are so dear to my heart. Thank you for being here this morning. It just warms my heart to see all of you. Oops, I forgot the clicker. We're hoping that works. So the title of my talk this morning is Sacred Stillness, Opening to Infinite Love. You know, a couple of weeks ago I was here and Reverend Joe T. was speaking about compassion in action. And compassion in action is love as we spread it outward. But today we're going to turn the focus inward. And we're going to talk about how we can show greater love, kindness, and compassion towards ourselves. We're going to start by talking about the nature of infinite love and the God presence within our hearts. And then we're going to take a look at what stands in the way, getting clear of those obstacles that stand in the way of us connecting more deeply with that divine spark within our hearts. And then finally, we're going to spend a little time this morning, this is my favorite part, letting go of those obstacles, releasing and surrendering them to God, to Spirit, and connecting deeply with that infinite love that is within our hearts. So I believe that the journey to greater kindness and compassion towards ourselves begins with knowing our true heart identity, which is one of love, of divine love, of infinite love. And that love is God or Spirit within us. You know, the Sufis, the mystical branch of Islam, they have a beautiful way of viewing the heart, and it's a little bit different from our Western view. You know, this summer I had the pleasure of taking a class through the Holmes Institute by Dr. Robert Frager, and in his book, Heart, Self, and Soul, he says that in the West, it's our nature to believe that being in the heart is just one who feels deeply. And yes, that is true. But the Sufis take it into a little more complex view, and it's very rich in that they see the heart as a divine temple. I love that. That the heart is a divine temple that houses the spark of God within us. And the Sufis have so many beautiful practices for clearing the space and opening the heart with the goal of making it fit for God's presence. I love that notion of it being a temple for God's presence. And I would take it just a little bit further to say that God's presence is always existing in our heart. It is simply our access and our connection to it. And it's up to us to access that presence. So kindness and compassion are the inherent byproducts. They're that what happens when we spend time in our hearts dwelling in the presence of God. When we touch that divine spark and within ourselves, we become kindness and compassion, for that is our divine nature. But it takes getting intimate. I know, and I said the word intimate. It has many, many connotations in today's world. But for today, we're going to be looking at intimacy as its meaning. Into me, see. It's really about getting intimate with our own hearts. And when we get in there and we get intimate with our own hearts, then we are able to fill our internal buckets to overflowing. We set that fuel gauge to full. And then, when that fuel gauge is set to fuel, kindness and compassion simply overflow. It's who we are. So how do we get there? I don't know about you, but sometimes I have a few obstacles that get in the way. I have a few things, some belief systems, some mental chatter, and even the busyness of my life that gets in the way with my ability to connect in my heart. I'm going to share two possible ways this morning that we can really get clear and begin to connect with our heart. And the first one is to develop and grow that intimacy with the divine spark in our heart. And the second, the way that we do that is through slowing down and spending time in sacred stillness. And the second is being present with what is there once we slow down and spend time in that sacred stillness. And when we are able to be present with what is there, we're able to cleanse it, embrace it, surrender it to the divine. And that all comes through our power to be still, to cleanse, to release, and to love what is when we get there. So, sacred stillness. It's to pause, be still, and listen deeply. And this is a process of deepening that happens over time. Buddhist teacher Tara Brach calls it an intentional ritual that we have with ourselves. And she says that sacred stillness brings about that intimacy with ourselves that makes real relating possible. Imagine, and I have the perfect example of this practice in action. And it starts with a spiritual community. If you'll travel with me for the moment, way north to the northern shores of Scotland, through the Highlands, to a spiritual community way at the north called Findhorn. Nothing demonstrates the power of getting still and listening to our inner spiritual guidance more than the story of the founding of this eco-village at Findhorn. My girls and I were very blessed and fortunate to be able to travel there this past July. And so I want you to take a journey in your imagination for a moment into this gorgeous forest. This forest that is alive. That when we enter this forest, we could actually feel like the power of nature. It was a communication, it was a conversation that was happening as we walked through and we communed with this these trees. You know, peat is the soil there, and peat is actual living organism. And as we'd walk through there, we could feel that aliveness in our feet. It was like a love is in the air kind of a feeling. It was truly magical. It really was. And Findhorn was founded in the 1960s when Eileen Caddy, I know Leah read a little piece from her autobiography. Eileen Caddy and her husband Peter and their 3 small boys and Dorothy McLean settled in a trailer. You can see the trailer here, near a rubbish dump at the edge of the sand dunes. And they began to follow their inner spiritual guidance. This is a story of a spiritual community that was built entirely from that still small voice within. Eileen Caddy would meditate absolutely every single day. At one point in the book, she says to God, you know, I'm not sure where I'm going to find space with 6 people in this caravan to actually have time to find that silence to connect with you. And what she heard from that inner still small voice was, go to the public restrooms. And she said, well, that doesn't seem very reverent. But the voice instead said, go. It doesn't matter. It's the still small voice within. And so she would. In the middle of her day, she'd go down to the public restrooms and sit there and listen. And she would listen for what's next. She would listen for what is this. She would simply listen. And sometimes she'd hear something and these beautiful words that Leah read, or sometimes she'd hear nothing. But she still showed up to listen, to commune with her spirit and with the Spirit of God. And Dorothy connected with the plant spirits. She connected with the wisdom of nature and listened deeply to what do I feel from the plants? What is this communication? And Peter used he was the muscles in the situation. He used his intuition and his energy in order to go out and build what that spiritual guidance was showing them. So they meditated. They infused light and love into the soil. They infused light and love into their connection with each other. And over time, they began to connect with other light and spiritual centers around the planet to build this network of light. And in a few short years, this wasteland came to life. Nearly 300 people were living in the village of Findhorn by the early 1970s. The BBC came to interview them because they were growing 40-pound cabbages. Their chart is still very beautiful, I can attest to that. And because it was such a miracle in this extreme northern climate where it was just rocky sand dunes, and everybody, if you looked at it, you'd be like, you can't grow a garden there. It was a miracle. This wasteland came to life. So the girls and I spent the afternoon in these forests. You know, we were listening to the rocks. At one point, Maddie, my daughter, came to me and she said, "Can I take this rock home?" And I said, "I don't know, ask the rock." And so we began to listen and to practice. And we spent 30 minutes looking for a rock that actually would say yes to coming home with us. It took a while, but finally we found the rock that was in resonance with coming home. Findhorn is such a magnificent metaphor. Many of us have wastelands within ourselves, within our hearts. We have wastelands within our finances. We have wastelands within our relationships. We have wastelands within our relationship with ourselves. We have wastelands in certain thought patterns that are moving over and over again that stand in our way. And those wastelands within our lives are where we've lost that greening power of spirit. When we let go within and listen deeply to that spiritual guidance, when we get in touch with that divine spark within our heart, when we allow in that surrender, it has the power to green all of the wastelands of our minds, our experiences, and our relationships. You know, our founder, Ernest Holmes, urges us to do this in my absolute favorite book, page 42. It's had maybe a little dip in the bathtub too, this book. It's well loved. But Ernest says, plant love in your garden. Kindness and sympathy flow from the heart of love. Human goodness follows divine realization at every turn in life's road. Kindness and understanding are divine flames, lighted from the altar of love which burns in the light eternal. So that brings us to the second way. The second way that we can go within that sacred stillness, and when we connect with our heart, loving what it is that we find there, going in to be able to fully accept all the places inside of us, both the shadow and the light. And this allows us to let go of that armoring around our heart that sometimes prevents us to be open to tenderness. I think that we're going to circle back around to the Buddhist teacher Tara Brach, because she shares the story of Buddha in her book, Radical Acceptance. She says that being present with all that is within is exactly what the Buddha did when he went and sat down under that Bodhi tree. As the story goes, when Buddha was a young child, he was raised in his father's palaces, surrounded by all of those riches, living very protected but unaware about all of the real life going outside of the palace walls. And so then, when he finally decides to go out in the world, he goes out in the world and he goes to the absolute opposite side of it. He's pushing away all of the pleasures. He's denying himself his desires. But when he finally gets to that middle way, he sits down under that tree of awakening. And he simply stops all of his activities of trying to become pure and sits still. He sits down there and he allows himself to face the shadows that arise. And they arise in the form and the guise of Mara, the deity of greed and hatred and delusion. And there's this famous Tibetan tanka, which is a picture or a tapestry sometimes, that shows Mara attacking the Buddha in a shower of poisoned arrows. And these poisoned arrows represent all of the shadow deities. And as the Buddha is sitting there in that classic posture of compassion with one hand on the heart and one hand open to receive, Those arrows coming at him simply transform into lotus petals at his feet. That's so pretty. And that is all of that anger, shame, doubt, jealousy, fear, all of it is transformed through a joyful and wakeful, loving presence. Not by doing, just by being. And through that sacred pause. Here's a slide. If some of you are my Facebook friends, you might have seen this week. I shared it. It's brought to us by Buddha Doodles, and it's in honor of a quote by Mark Nepo that says, "The best chance to be whole is to love whatever gets in the way until it ceases to be an obstacle." Sometimes tough stuff. Somebody wrote that under my thing. They said, that's rough. That's easy to say. So finally, to close today, we're going to take a little journey into our own hearts, and we're going to practice being still, connecting with that God presence within. As you came in, you might have received a small little twig. And that twig actually came from, I was recently inspired by another book. And this other book came through a beautiful Christian writer and minister, Lisa Terkust, in her New York Times bestselling book called Uninvited, Living Loved When You Feel Less Than, Left Out, and Lonely. And in this book, she tells a story of her kitchen, who she was looking at had some issues. And she wanted to make a small cosmetic fix. And when she invited the contractor in, what she thought was going to be a small cosmetic fix turned into a big pile of boards and a whole lot of remodeling. And she said, I really was beginning, though, I saw the metaphoric example to what was happening to my kitchen as to what was happening in my very own life. And she said, as I looked at these pile of boards, thankful to Kathy Noonamaker, whose son cut these for us this morning. They're very authentic. See the dirt? She said, as I looked at that, I pictured myself tearing out these old, worn-out boards that have inadequately propped me up for so long. I imagined myself placing these boards in a pile, this pile containing all those things that I can remove from me now that I have built and developed and really felt my new intimacy-based identity with my God nature. And she says, and as I light this candle, I would invite you to hold that little twig as a symbol of some of the boards that maybe you'd be willing to get in touch with this morning, that you're ready to surrender. Surrender because they no longer adequately prop you up in your life, because your God identity is the identity that props you up in your life. That identity is the strongest one. It will never need remodeling. It will never need a cosmetic fix, because it is your very nature. And as Lisa was writing, she said, I imagined myself laying down my need to understand the way things happen the way they do. I laid down my fears about others walking away and taking their love with them. I laid down my desire to prove my worth. I laid down my resistance to fully trust God and Spirit. I lay down my being so self-consumed in an attempt to protect myself. I lay down my anger, my unforgiveness, my stubborn ways that beg me to build walls when I sense hints of rejection. I lay down all these things with my broken boards, and I ask that your holy fire, dear Spirit, consume them until they become weightless ashes. And as I walk away, my soul feels safe. My soul feels held. And I truly feel free to finally be me. So today we end And I'd invite you, if you want to hold that small twig as a symbol of all that you're ready to let go of in your life. And a symbol of reconnecting with your own beautiful divine nature. I would invite you to place your hands on your heart and breathe in and breathe out. Breathe in kindness, breathe out compassion. Breathe in kindness, breathe out compassion, and feel all of those things that you're ready to be present with, to embrace, and to surrender into the hands of Spirit. And as you hold your precious heart, breathing in and out, consider this song, which I'm going to sing first a couple times, and then you can join in with me. This is the day when I throw it all away into the fire of the all-loving one. Oh, now I have just what I need to be free, to feel who I really am. This is the day when I throw it all away into the fire of the all-loving one. Oh, now I have just what I need to be free, to feel who I really am. Join with me. This is the day when I throw it all away into the fire of the all-loving one. Oh, now I have just what I need to be free, to feel who I really am. Feel who you really are. This is the day when I throw it all away into the fire of the all-loving one. Oh, now I have just what I need to be free, to feel who I really am. And I would invite all the practitioners and ministerial representatives to stand with me in high consciousness as we close in prayer. Just breathing in deeply that deep kindness and compassion that is God, that is that divine spark that lights all of creation, that lights each heart in this room, that lights each mind, each heart on this planet. And breathing and feeling that divine spark flowing in and around, I absolutely know that all that is ready to be released, that is in the way of us feeling, knowing, embracing, and embodying that divine presence, that divine nature that is who we really are, is released with ease, with grace, and let go into that holy fire. That fire of the all-loving one, that is Spirit. And I know for each heart here that kindness and compassion is the way, the shine, the absolute way. It is in every aspect of each life in this room. I feel and I know that truth, and I feel the blessing that Sufi Rumi, the poet, said, that love is the bridge between you and everything. And so with that gentleness and that compassion and that inner divine flame, we say yes. We say yes to life. We say yes to being gentle to ourselves, to loving ourselves and allowing that divine nature to be, to be, to be. And so it is with such gratitude I feel and I know that this time is blessed, that these words continue to grow and to bloom and to expand, and to spread out within our lives, within our hearts, and within all our loved ones, and all throughout all of the planet. I feel so grateful. And so if you would all, with this gratitude and with this love, feel this within your heart, and as we release this into that law, which is always manifesting that which is placed within it, we can feel that gratitude, set these words free, and affirm together. And so it is.